Nicolas Cage arrived at the Good Morning America studio unusually early that morning, known for his erratic genius and unpredictable media presence. He had agreed grudgingly to do the live interview to promote his latest psychological thriller. The Abyss Stares Back. Producers were cautious. The last time Cage appeared live on television, he had gone on a tangent about metaphysics and lost time, confusing even the most seasoned hosts. But this time, the pressure was real. The film was a passion project, partially self-funded, and its early reviews were polarizing. Cage wanted it to be understood, but George Stephanopoulos had other plans. The questions weren't just about the film, they dug deep into Cage's past, his tax problems, his infamous outbursts, his marriage history, even a now-viral video of him yelling at a barista in Prague. The tension visible even in the first 60 seconds only grew heavier, and then it snapped. George leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nicolas, do you think your erratic behavior over the years has undermined your credibility as a serious actor?" There was a pause longer than television likes. The studio lights seemed to freeze. Cage tilted his head slowly, then gave a soft laugh, but it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief. "Are you asking me that, Liv?" he said, voice low but razor-sharp. George nodded. "Yes, because people want to know if the Nicolas Cage they're watching on screen is a character or just you being well, you?" The camera panned just in time to catch the flicker in Cage's eyes. "The storm building? You want to reduce 30 years of risk-taking, heartbreak, and discipline to a meme," he hissed. "You sit there with cue cards, calling it journalism, but what you're doing is an ambush." There was an audible gasp from someone off camera. George tried to maintain control, replying, "I'm doing my job, Nicolas. I ask questions, you tell your story." But that was the wrong line. Cage stood up, not theatrically, but deliberately, and took off his mic. "You don't want my story. You want to humiliate me in soundbites." He stepped back, now completely out of frame. The film is about spiraling into madness when no one listens, and here I am, watched by millions, while this man treats my life like clickbait. Chaos erupted. Crew members scrambled. The director cut to a wide shot, only to catch Cage's back as he stormed toward the studio exit. George sat frozen, hands folded, lips pressed tight as producers whispered frantically in his earpiece. But the damage was done. Twitter, or X, as some insisted, flooded with reactions. Hashtags like #Cage, UNCAGED, and #GMA Clash trended worldwide. Some defended Nicolas fiercely, praising his bravery for walking off and calling George's approach condescending journalism. Others mocked Cage, sharing slowed-down footage of his face just before he exploded. But amidst the memes, and memes layered with commentary, something deeper stirred. Other actors, especially those from the old guard, began speaking up. Willem Dafoe posted a cryptic quote, "Actors are not court jesters." Cate Blanchett liked multiple posts supporting Cage. Even Tim Burton commented, "The industry likes its geniuses broken, but not outspoken. That's the real madness." Meanwhile, ABC scrambled to release a statement. "We regret that today's interview with Mr. Nicolas Cage did not go as planned. Our intention is always to engage in meaningful dialogue. It was bland, cold, designed to close a wound with bureaucracy. But it didn't land. Viewers were too emotionally invested. When a guest walks off live TV in a storm of accusation and sorrow, it's no longer about ratings, it's about reckoning." Cage, for his part, remained silent. No tweets, no Instagram posts, no publicist statements. He disappeared, as he often does. And the silence was deafening. Fans began posting old interviews, piecing together his philosophy. They never understood him. One viral comment read, "He was never playing us, he was playing the system." 3 days later, Cage emerged. Not with a press conference or a late-night redemption arc, but with a handwritten letter, photographed, and posted on his niece's fan account. "I've been misunderstood before. It doesn't frighten me. But I walked off because I realized, in that moment, I was no longer being heard. Art is sacred. Pain is sacred. If a man can't speak of either without being mocked, then maybe silence is the loudest protest he can make." The note ended simply, "To those who heard me anyway, thank you." It was raw, unedited, and it cracked something open. Film critics, long divided over Cage's legacy, began revisiting his body of work. Think pieces emerged with titles like The Mad Genius, Hollywood Tried to Break, and Cage, The Last Mythical Actor. George Stephanopoulos, usually unflappable, faced his own backlash. Old interviews resurfaced moments where he interrupted, condescended, or cornered guests. A trend emerged. The more emotional the guest, the more mechanical his approach. Viewers asked, when did journalism become provocation? ABC stood by him, but trust had been shaken. For a network built on morning charm and glossy optimism, this moment felt like a jolt of ice water. Ratings dipped, sponsors raised eyebrows, and behind closed doors, executives whispered about reformatting the interview segments to avoid future disasters. But the moment had already passed into cultural folklore. Late-night shows parodied the event. Animated reenactments flooded TikTok. But deeper still, artists began responding in the language they knew best. A New York performance artist staged a one-man piece called The Walk-Off, using only Cage film monologues. A gallery in Berlin painted a 12-foot mural of Cage with his mouth taped shut, eyes burning through the silence. The incident wasn't just a meme, it had become a symbol of authenticity versus entertainment, of artists versus platforms, of humanity versus soundbites. And Nicolas Cage, long dismissed as eccentric, had become the reluctant icon of a growing cultural resistance to the sanitized spectacle of morning television. Back at Good Morning America, things changed. Not visibly at first, but guests noticed hosts asking fewer personal jabs. Segments gave more time for answers. There were apologist quiet off-camera ones from producers to staffers, from bookers to agents. The studio chair Cage vacated. That morning remained empty for weeks, even during live broadcasts. No one said why, but everyone knew it wasn't about Cage anymore. It was about what he represented, the last man to walk out, not for fame, but for the sanctity of being heard. And that, more than any film or viral moment, was a performance no one would forget. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Nicolas Cage's stormy departure from Good Morning America. But the ripples still hadn't settled. In a world where stories burn out in 48 hours, this one kept smoldering. Cage's silent protest had become a kind of legend, a cipher for everything pent up and unsaid in the world of performance, fame, and public scrutiny. But then, seemingly, out of nowhere, Cage was announced as the surprise keynote speaker at the Venice Film Symposium, a gathering usually reserved for stoic intellectuals and old-world auteurs. The media was stunned. Would he speak of the walkout? Would he lash out again? Would he even show up? For days, the press speculated, but when the night came, he arrived clad in a deep blue velvet blazer, sunglasses on despite the duskend, walked directly to the stage without so much as a glance toward the camera crews. When he spoke, his voice was slow, even thoughtful, but carried with it the tension of someone balancing on a wire between fury and grace. I've been acting for 40 years, he began, but I've only been listened to. Maybe 10 of those. The room went still. We've commodified madness. Brilliance is mocked unless it's explained in a soundbite. And I'm not here to be explained. The crowd didn't clap. They breathed, silent, hanging on every word. When I walked off that show, he continued, I wasn't walking away from a host. I was walking away from a version of myself I no longer wanted to be complicit in the media-trained mannequin, pretending to be grateful while being dissected like a science project. Every filmmaker, student, and star in the room felt the sting, because many had been there. Few had said it. Back in New York, George Stephanopoulos was under pressure. Ratings hadn't recovered. Producers debated rebranding the segment altogether. Some insiders suggested George take a sabbatical, but he refused, doubling down on his legacy. In a carefully scripted appearance on Nightline, he called the Cage incident a miscommunication. Unfortunate, but exaggerated. It backfired. Social media exploded. One clip from the GMA confrontation had now amassed over 89 million views. Fans demanded an apology. Hollywood figures who rarely spoke on such matters began to weigh in again. Jodie Foster posted a single sentence on Instagram. Respect begins when performance ends. That quote alone ignited a new round of debate. Whispers grew louder. George had crossed a line, and people were tired of watching icons be reduced. To headline bait, meanwhile, Cage returned to Los Angeles and secluded himself in an editing studio deep in Silver Lake, rumored to be working on a self-directed film based on the events. No title, no synopsis, just rumors. Some said it would be a surreal meta-thriller about fame and ego. Others claimed it would be a documentary-style chronicle of his inner disintegration. A few crew members leaked cryptic stills, a shot of Cage standing alone in a cracked mirror room, another of him screaming underwater in a tuxedo. Whatever it was, anticipation grew. Studio execs reached out with distribution offers. He ignored them all. This wasn't about profit anymore. It was about reclaiming control of his image, his art, and his silence. The silence, though, wasn't his alone anymore. Younger actors began speaking out, many sharing their own experiences with exploitative interviews. Florence Pugh recalled being asked about her love life while trying to discuss a trauma-centered film. Jonathan Majors admitted to walking out of interviews that minimized his work to superhero soundbites. Suddenly, the Cage incident wasn't just about Cage, it was a flashpoint, a cultural shift. Networks scrambled to adapt. Some instituted new guest-first policies. Others hired interview sensitivity advisors, a term mocked online but embraced by publicists. A few even quietly blacklisted George Stephanopoulos from booking high-profile celebrities. He denied it, of course, but doors were closing, quietly, firmly. When the trailer for Cage's untitled project dropped midnight release on Vimeo, no studio backing it, crashed the site in minutes. Grainy, unconventional, no title cards, just a montage of chaos, vintage Hollywood reels burning. A child in a wolf mask howling under stage lights, Cage sobbing in an empty auditorium. No explanation, but it hit like a thunderclap. Film forums went wild. Reddit threads popped up by the thousands trying to decode the meaning. Cage didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The trailer alone became an artistic rebellion, a scream without subtitles. Critics either called it unwatchable genius or pretentious nonsense. But no one ignored it. And that, Cage seemed to understand, was the real win. Later, during a live town hall event about media ethics hosted by NPR, George Stephanopoulos made an unannounced appearance. Many expected him to apologize. He didn't. Instead, he doubled down. Celebrities know what they sign up for. If they can't take the heat, maybe they shouldn't sit in the chair. A collective gasp filled the room. That clip was played on loop for days. It didn't land as strength at Reed as arrogance. Even former